They called me a failure, said I'd never be on TV. But when my face flashed across that screen, the same people who doubted me were begging for front row seats. This is what happens when you stop listening to the noise and start proving them wrong. Growing up, I was the dreamer of the family. While everyone else played it safe, I wanted something bigger: lights, cameras, a stage with my name on it. But dreams aren't free. They cost you doubt. They cost you loneliness. And sometimes, they cost you the approval of the people you love most. My family didn't just doubt me, they mocked me. You'll never make it. Get a real job. Words like that don't just hurt. They bury themselves in your mind. But here's the truth. The moment you stop needing their validation is the moment you start winning. If you've ever been told you're not good enough, hit that like button right now. And subscribe, because this story, it's about to get real. Rejection from strangers is one thing, but when it comes from your own family, it cuts deeper. I spent years trying to fix myself, to be more realistic, but the harder I tried to fit their mold, the more I lost myself. The first laugh. It started with a joke, one I wasn't supposed to hear. I was 15, sitting at the dinner table, when I finally gathered the courage to say it out loud. I want to be on TV someday. The room didn't go silent. It erupted. My brother choked on his drink, coughing between bursts of laughter like I'd just told the funniest punchline of his life. "Yeah, and I'll be president," he wheezed, slapping the table like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. My parents didn't scold him. They exchanged looks, the kind that said, "Should we humor him or shut this down now?" That laugh wasn't just dismissive, it was a verdict. It wasn't, "That's a big dream," it was, "You never." And that moment stuck to me like glue. I replayed it every time I practiced my lines in the mirror, every time I saved up for another acting workshop, every time I wondered if I was wasting my time. But here's what they didn't understand. That laugh didn't break me. It lit something. It forced me to ask myself the only question that mattered. Do I believe them? And the answer was a quiet, stubborn no. I didn't need their faith. I just needed mine. Years later, when my brother saw me on a billboard for the first time, he didn't mention that dinner. But I remembered. Because that laugh, it was the first push. Not the kind that lifts you up. The kind that makes you dig your heels in and say, "Watch me." And when you're standing where I am now, looking back at the people who swore you'd fail, you realize something. Their doubt was never about your limits. It was about theirs. And that's the most freeing truth of all. The silent treatment. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes when the people who are supposed to cheer loudest for you choose silence instead. I'd spend hours in my room rehearsing monologues, pouring my heart into every word, only to walk downstairs and find my family gathered around the TV, volume cranked up just high enough to drown me out. No comments, no encouragement, just this unspoken agreement to pretend my passion didn't exist. It wasn't outright cruelty. In some ways, that would have been easier. At least anger has energy. This was colder, like I was a ghost in my own home, fading into the background of their real lives. I'd test it sometimes, leaving scripts lying around or accidentally mentioning an audition, hoping for even a scrap of interest. Nothing. Their indifference was a wall I kept slamming into, each collision chipping away at my confidence. But here's what they didn't realize. Silence leaves room for echoes. In that void, I started hearing my own voice clearer. I memorized lines to the rhythm of their disinterest, practiced expressions in the bathroom mirror while they laughed at sitcoms downstairs. Their silence taught me to be my own audience, my own critic, my own standing ovation. Years later, when they finally saw me perform, not in some dingy community theater but under stadium lights, the irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who once turned up the volume to ignore me were now leaning forward in their seats, hanging on my every word. But by then, it didn't matter if they listened. I'd already learned the most important lesson. Sometimes the quietest rooms grow the loudest dreams, and when no one claps for you, you learn to make your own applause. The breaking point. There comes a moment when doubt stops being background noise and becomes a deafening scream. For me, it happened when I stood trembling backstage at a tiny local theater, about to perform my first real monologue for an audience of maybe 20 people. I'd spent weeks preparing, skipping meals to afford the audition fee, lying to my family about where I was going. Then, just before curtain call, my phone buzzed with a text. "Stop embarrassing yourself, come home." 7 words that hit like a gut punch. I walked on stage that night with tears burning behind my eyes, my voice shaking through every line. The applause afterward meant nothing. All I could hear was that sentence on loop. That was the night I almost quit. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed afterward, staring at my reflection in the dark window, wondering if they were right. Maybe I was delusional. Maybe this dream was just a child's fantasy I'd clung to for too long. But then something unexpected happened. Anger. Not the hot screaming kind, but a slow burning fire in my chest. I realized their words weren't about protecting me. They were about boxing me into what made them comfortable. That text became my turning point. I stopped hiding my rehearsals, stopped downplaying my ambitions, started saying I'm an actor, out loud without flinching. Because here's the truth about breaking points. They don't always destroy you. Sometimes they break open something stronger inside you, the part that finally says, "Watch me," instead of "What if you're right?" Years later, when that same person asked for backstage passes to my Broadway debut, I didn't mention that text. But I framed my first playbill and hung it right where I'd once seen that defeated reflection. The glass doesn't show tears anymore, just proof. The first yes. The voicemail changed everything. A real casting director's voice saying the words I'd dreamed of hearing. "We want you." 3 syllables that erased 1,000 rejections. I played it 17 times that night, pacing. My tiny apartment equal parts exhilarated and terrified. This wasn't some student film or unpaid gig. It was an actual national commercial with real cameras, a professional crew, and most terrifying of all, a paycheck that would finally let me quit the soul-crushing diner job I'd been working. The shoot date landed on my mother's birthday. When I called home, breathless with news, the pause on the line stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "That's nice," she finally said, followed by the question that would haunt me for years. "And but what's next?" Not "I'm proud of you," not "tell me more." Just that hungry ghost of a question, always demanding more proof, more validation, more reasons to take me seriously. I showed up to set the next week with their doubt ringing in my ears, but something unexpected happened. The moment the director called action, it all fell silent. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family disappointment or the delusional dreamer. I was just an actor, doing the work I was born to do. When the spot aired 2 months later, I gathered everyone to watch the premiere. My father spent the entire 30 seconds checking his watch. My sister asked if they'd paid me enough to cover rent, but none of that mattered like the moment the commercial ended and my phone lit up with messages from strangers saying, "You were amazing." That's when I understood. Sometimes the loudest support comes from people who owe you nothing, while the quietest comes from those who owe you everything. That first yes wasn't just a job. It was permission to stop waiting for their approval, to matter. The hustle. Dawn smelled like bleach and burnt coffee for 3 straight years. I'd clock out from the 4 a.m. janitor shift at the office building, change clothes in my car, and be first in line when the acting studio opened at 7. The other students never knew my hands still smelled of disinfectant when we did scene work, just like the law firm employees never knew their trash guy was studying Shakespeare during lunch breaks. Every dollar I scraped together had 2 purposes: surviving today while buying tomorrow's chance. I learned to stretch $5 meals across 3 days, to repair shoes with duct tape, to smile when relatives asked, "When are you going to get a real job?" The hardest part wasn't the physical exhaustion. It was the mental calculus of constantly weighing dreams against reality. That moment in the grocery line, putting back necessities to afford headshots. The humiliation when a classmate recognized me mopping floors at their fancy gym. The nights I'd lie awake, calculating how many more shifts stood between me and proper acting classes versus just paying rent. But here's what they never tell you about the grind. It forges an unshakable certainty. When you've sacrificed real blood, sweat, and tears for something, you stop questioning whether you want it. Every calloused hand and missed party became proof of commitment they couldn't dismiss as childish fantasy. Those years taught me more than any acting school ever could. How to find dignity in struggle, how to work when no one's watching, how to treat every no as fuel rather than failure. Now, when young actors ask for advice, I don't just tell them to study technique. I tell them to remember this. The jobs that humble you today will be the stories that inspire people tomorrow. My back still aches sometimes from all those years of bending over floors, but now I stand taller because of it. The big risk. The bus ticket burned in my pocket like an accusation all 300 miles to the city. $200, one suitcase, and a friend's couch that sagged in the middle. That was my entire empire when I arrived. I'd played the moment. In my head 1,000 times. The dramatic farewell, the proud declaration that I was leaving to chase my dreams. Instead, I slipped out at dawn like a thief, leaving only a vague note about needing space. The truth? I was terrified they'd say something that would make me stay. The city didn't care about my fears. It swallowed me whole. The noise, the smells, the way everyone walked like they had somewhere better to be. My first week, I got lost 3 times trying to find casting offices, each wrong turn costing precious subway fare. I learned to pack snacks in my bag because hunger made me desperate in auditions, to time my showers when my friend wasn't home to avoid awkward questions, to laugh when agents took one look at my homemade headshots and slid them back across the desk. But here's what no one tells you about rock bottom. It makes every small victory taste like champagne. The first callback that came from one of those rejected headshots. The bartender who let me practice monologues during slow shifts in exchange for free drinks. The way sunlight hit my face one random Tuesday morning as I walked to yet another audition. And I realized with startling clarity, even if I failed, this version of me, the one who dared to try, was already someone my old self would have envied. That couch left a permanent dent in my back, but it also taught me the most valuable lesson. Comfort is the enemy of growth. And when you have nothing left to lose, that's when you finally start playing to win. The first win. The check arrived. On a Thursday, wrinkled from being carried in my pocket for 3 days like some sacred talisman. Not just any check. My first real payment for acting, with a production company's logo in the corner and enough zeros to cover 2 months' rent. I sat on the floor of my shoebox apartment staring at it until the numbers blurred, waiting for the validation to hit. But the triumph felt strangely hollow when I called home. "That's cute," my mother said in that tone that turned compliments into backhanded slaps. "But what's next?" The words hung between us like always, never celebrating the present, just demanding more future. I framed that check anyway and hung it above my sink where I'd see it brushing my teeth, a daily reminder that someone out there believed I was worth paying. The commercial itself aired during some forgettable late-night show, but I still recorded it on a VHS tape I'd found at a thrift store. Watching myself on that grainy screen, I expected to feel like an imposter, but instead saw something surprising. Competence. Not brilliance, not stardom, but proof I belonged in the frame. That's when I understood. External validation would always be a moving target, especially with people determined not to be impressed. The real victory wasn't the check or the airtime. It was the quiet realization that my belief in myself no longer depended on theirs. Years later, when that commercial resurfaced online and fans called it vintage and iconic, I thought about that phone call. How she'd made my milestone feel small, how I'd let her, and how nothing, not fame, not success, not 1,000 glowing reviews, would ever change the fact that some people simply choose not to see you no matter how brightly you shine. The audition that changed everything. The waiting room smelled like desperation and too much perfume, packed with actors who all looked more prepared than me. I clutched my worn-out sides, the pages soft from being folded and unfolded 100 times in my tiny apartment. This wasn't just another audition. It was the national TV show everyone talked about, but no one actually believed they'd book. My hands shook so badly I had to sit on them. The girl next to me smirked when she saw my thrift store blazer, the one I'd stitched the lining back into myself. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the years of rejection hardening into focus, or the quiet realization that I had nothing left to lose. But when they called my name, the fear evaporated. The casting director barely looked up as I walked in, already exhausted by the parade of hopefuls. Then I delivered my first line, and her pen froze mid-air. By the third beat, she was sitting forward. By the callback, she was smiling. 2 weeks later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "You got it," the producer said, like it was just another Tuesday. But for me, it was the moment my life cracked open. I didn't scream or cry. I just slid down my apartment, wall onto the floor, pressing my forehead to my knees, replaying every no that had led to this yes. The irony wasn't lost on me, that the role I'd landed was literally an underdog who defied the odds. The universe has a sense of humor like that. But here's what they don't tell you about big breaks. They don't feel like fireworks. When they happen, they feel like the air before a storm, charged, inevitable, like every step you've ever taken was leading you here. And when you finally exhale, that's when you realize the hardest part wasn't getting the opportunity. It was becoming the person ready to seize it. The call. The voicemail notification blinked at 3:17 a.m. Some cruel joke, I thought. Another rejection arriving at the worst possible time. I almost deleted it unheard. But then the producer's voice crackled through. Exhaustion and excitement tangled together. "You're on. Live next month." 4 words that rewrote my history. I played it 7 times before the meaning fully landed, my hands numb against the phone. This wasn't just any gig. It was the late-night show my family watched religiously, the one they quoted at Sunday dinners like scripture, the same stage where legends had stood. And now, my name would scroll across that iconic marquee. I drove to an empty parking lot as dawn broke just to scream where no one could hear, the steering wheel gripping back as I shook with disbelieving laughter. All the years of secret rehearsals, the side eyes at family gatherings when I dared mention acting, the way they'd changed the subject when I brought up my dreams. None of it could touch this moment. The validation should have been sweet, but it burned going down, sharp as whiskey. Because here's the truth no one admits about dreams coming true. The first person you want to call is the one who never believed in you. Not to gloat, but because some childish part of you still waits for them to finally see you. I scrolled to my mother's contact, thumb hovering, then closed the app. This victory was mine before it was ever theirs. By sunrise, my phone buzzed with my manager's 50-point prep plan, but all I could fixate on was the surreal simplicity of it all. After a lifetime of climbing, the summit looked nothing like I'd imagined. No fanfare, no epiphany, just me alone in a car, realizing the mountain had never been success at all. It was learning to stop carrying their doubt up every damn slope with me. The performance would come and go, but this quiet certainty that I'd earned my place, that would outlast any applause. The irony. The promo aired during their favorite show. I knew because my sister texted me a screenshot of our living room TV with my face glowing in the corner captioned, "Is this you?" As if some stranger had stolen my identity. And not that I'd been working toward this for a decade. Within minutes, my phone became a museum of their sudden interest. Aunts I hadn't heard from since childhood holidays asking for backstage passes, cousins who'd mocked my dreams now claiming they'd always supported me. Even my father, who once told me acting was a hobby for the unemployed, asking if I could get him tickets for business contacts. The whiplash of their enthusiasm should have felt vindicating. Instead, it settled like ash in my mouth. Because here's the dirty secret about proving people wrong. When they finally acknowledge your success, it doesn't erase the years they ignored your struggle. That night, staring at the ceiling of my now decent apartment, I waited for the satisfaction to hit. It never came. Just a hollow echo where their approval should have mattered. Like clapping for a runner after you spent years tripping them at the starting line. The real revelation wasn't that they'd changed their minds. It was realizing I no longer needed them to. When the show finally aired, I didn't invite anyone to a viewing party. I sat alone with takeout, watching my younger self's dreams play out in HD, and discovered something unexpected: freedom. Not from their doubt, but from the weight of waiting for it to turn into pride. The standing ovation that followed, I barely heard it over the sound of my own quiet laughter, at the irony, at their sudden amnesia about my silly little hobby, but mostly at how hard I'd once fought for a spotlight that now felt most authentic when shared with no one but myself. The night of the show, I looked into the camera and thought, this is for every time you said I couldn't. And when the crowd cheered, I didn't need their approval anymore. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. For years, I let their words define me. But the moment I stopped begging for their support and started believing in my own hustle, everything changed. Rejection isn't the end. It's the fuel. If you're watching this and someone has told you you're not enough, remember, the world doesn't decide your worth. You do. And when you finally break through, don't be surprised if the same people who doubted you suddenly want a front row seat to your success. But by then, you won't even care, because you didn't do it for them, you did it for you. If this hit home, smash that like button, subscribe for more real talk on turning pain into power, and tell me in the comments, who told you that? You couldn't do it? Let's prove them wrong together. The people who underestimate you are just setting the stage for your comeback.